Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. With the Season 4 Reloaded update, we of course got a ton of weapon tuning and a lot of surprise changes. Yeah, we saw some Vanguard guns get nerfed like we sort of expected with the NZ and the Blixen, but we also saw several buffs to a lot of Modern Warfare weapons, even some Cold War weapons, and today we're breaking down the new meta here in Season 4 Reloaded of Warzone. As we break it all down, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, you already know every day I got you covered with all things going on in COD, news, updates, loadouts, tips. You're gonna find it all right here. So feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. Also, quick reminder, if you have not picked up a pair of Gamer Advantage glasses, these are my advantage. I use these every single day. They're helping me sleep better at night. They're reducing headaches, eye strain, you name it. These things are phenomenal. They offer a ton of different frame options. They got prescription or regular lenses, something for everyone. And the link if you want to cop a pair will be down in the description below. Code Immortal gets you that nice little discount. So if you are a returning viewer on the channel, I'm sure this tier list looks familiar to you. We have every single weapon in the entire game on this list outside of the melees because they're kind of redundant. And we got them all ranked, whether they are top tier meta weapons, just competitive, viable, usable, nothing crazy, below average, you probably wouldn't use them, niche, meant for very specific things, or straight garbage. And first things first, we saw the Vargo-S drop yesterday as a new rifle. And honestly, this thing, I feel like is a pretty easy placement. I think it is just competitive. I would love to have this as a top meta weapon, add some more variety to the range, but it's just not great over long range. It's definitely a mid-range beast, if you will. The recoil is all right, but it has some strange like bounces horizontally here and there. Its mobility is decent, its damage is decent, but it's nothing that's going to, break the game ridiculously good. So to me, it's just another competitive option, primarily for mid-range and sniper support. But outside of that, I got a very long list of what all ended up changing yesterday, and we are going to adjust this list accordingly. So first things first, the bar ended up getting a nerf to recoil. Now, the bar's recoil before, relatively straightforward, basically straight vertical. Now it just has more bounce in between each shot, essentially. This pattern is a little bit longer in terms of how much it moves vertically, but it's still pretty easy to control. And I do think it remains a top tier weapon just because its damage output is pretty solid, especially through the first like 35 meters or so. It's great for Rebirth and Fortune's Keep. Also can hold its own on Caldera as well. So the bar is actually staying. The STG though got another nerf to its control, and I'm going to be honest, I feel like this one drops down into the competitive category. Its TTK has always been kind of mid-tier since the last few nerfs on it, and now just this sort of insult to injury, if you will, with the control nerf that I don't think it really needed, but they got it nonetheless. It's now a competitive rifle for sure, but far from the best option. Now, the Cooper also got a slight nerf to its horizontal control, but for the most part, it's still a top-tier mid-range rifle. Fantastic for sniper support, a top sniper support option in the game, top 1 or 2 depending on who you ask, so definitely still stays top tier meta. Surprisingly enough, the Itcher Burst got a slight velocity buff, but it's still kind of an awkward weapon that's primarily meant for close range. I don't see it getting better than competitive ever unless they do just some insane damage buff to it, so for now that one's also going to stay. Now here's an important one. The NZ41 got nerfs to its control, got nerfs to its damage. It received some solid changes, but it still has very minimal recoil, even though they adjusted it. I feel like it still needs an additional nerf before it's going to get knocked down out of top tier meta. Now, is it as broken as it was before? Absolutely not. It's a lot more balanced, but it's still very powerful and very consistent. So I do think it is a top tier weapon, but it's not the clear, obvious #1 choice. You can make a lot of arguments for a lot of other different weapons now. So we're moving in the right direction, but it still needs some work. Now, here's what I'm very excited about. The Nikita. We've talked about this before. Its TTK is insane, and it actually got a movement buff and a control buff with certain magazines, and this is easily a top tier rifle now. It's mainly meant for some mid-range fights. Again, could be used as sniper support or as a mid-range primary. You could get away with using it at longer ranges, but it's a lot harder to use there, very similar to the AS44. But these two rifles, I think, have become my favorite in the game because they're harder to use, but they're also so much more rewarding than everything else. So if you're a decent player, you can control recoil well. The Nikita and the AS44, those are what you want to be using right now because they will fry everyone. Now, surprisingly, the KGM40, which I think a lot of us expected to move up to this meta area after the NZ nerf. All right, post-edit Zach here. After further testing with the KGM40, initially I was going to say it didn't really move out of competitive, but I do think this one bumps up to top meta. It's frying, it's a laser beam. Despite the nerf, it feels super strong in this meta, so I think it's definitely like borderline top meta competitive. Very strong choice. Now, some more exciting ones. The AMAX, it got a damage buff, I think it's really going to shine on Fortune's Keep and Rebirth. On Caldera, maybe not as much. The long range capabilities of the AMAX are still somewhat limited versus some of these other Vanguard rifles, but this thing is borderline top tier meta now and a lot closer to what it was back on like Verdansk. So AMAX, a very, very competitive rifle at the moment. The Kilo also ended up getting a damage buff and a range buff. They reduced its mid-range drop-off, which is absolutely phenomenal. You'll love to see it. So this previously viable rifle, I think now honestly makes its way back into top meta. I mean, it's probably very close on this border of competitive and top meta. Obviously, it's limited with only 5 attachments. However, it is super easy to shoot and now has a really, really good range as well. So I think for the time being, it does deserve a spot amongst the meta weapons in the game because it's almost back to where it was back on Verdansk as well, where it's frying. Now the Farah I've already got here in top meta. It's one of the better non-Vanguard guns in the game, and it actually got a range buff, so of course it's going to stay here in top meta. A little bit slower than some Vanguard rifles, but still very, very solid. The Krig also got some surprising updates, a damage buff, and this definitely jumps up. You could make a case for it being top meta as well, alongside the Vargo, the Farah, the XM4, the QBZ. It's right there with all of those. Feeling very strong, super easy to use. I think we're starting to branch out more towards that non-Vanguard meta that we've wanted for quite some time. Also, the M13, which probably could have been in competitive prior to this update, I think makes its way into the top tier meta area as well. It got a neck damage multiplier, which makes it even more dominant and consistent across long range. We obviously know it's got low recoil, very similar TTK to the NZ, surprisingly. So the M13 and the Kilo, if you're looking for MW guns, you got some really solid choices right now. Now the Volk also got a headshot damage buff. That said, it's still limited a bit by its magazine capacity, and it's more so a mid-range rifle as well. And honestly, I'd be taking the Cooper, the AS44, and the Nikita over it, so I think it's going to remain competitive for now, but that's not to say it's not a good rifle, because it is. Now, the Armaguerra actually got a headshot nerf, and I'm not gonna lie, I do think that drops it down a bit, which is unfortunate because it has been feeling very good. But that said, it's one of the better competitive SMGs, but it is being limited a bit versus things like the Blixen and the Marco, which are still very, very strong. So I wouldn't necessarily take it over those guns, despite the fact that I really like it. The nerfs here are keeping it in check. Now the Blixen did receive some nerfs. It got a damage and a movement nerf, but it's still top tier. They didn't nerf the F3 barrel, which is the best barrel, so it's still a laser beam. It's gonna hit slightly less hard than before, but it's still very, very strong and very consistent. And it's easily still a top meta SMG, let alone a top meta weapon in the game. Same deal with the Marco. It got damage nerfs, but its mobility is still phenomenal, and it still has next to no recoil, so you can really fry and fly with this thing. It's just not gonna have a ridiculous TTK like it did before. Still just right there with things like the PPSH. The Type 100 obviously is so much better than everything else, but its control is so much worse. So if you're landing more shots with the Marco versus the Type 100, it's still going to have a better TTK. Now the UGR surprisingly got a damage buff, but again, its magazine capacity kind of limits it. It's a bit of an awkward weapon, so I don't see this one moving out of competitive. It's a solid and fun option, but nothing that's going to break the meta. Another surprising one, the Uzi got a damage buff. This thing I think jumps up into viable. It's very, very limited by its 32 round AE mags, so that's a big downside. If it had 50 rounds, probably competitive, but it's gonna feel better than before, which is super cool. Great for hip fire, great for close range, a little bit slow compared to some of the Vanguard subs, but definitely better. Cold War MP5 also saw a damage buff. I don't think that bumps it up into top meta. I'm still taking, you know, the MP40, the Blixen, the PPSH over it, but it is, it's going to be a little bit stronger than before, which you love to see. Decent mobility, especially for a non-Vanguard sub, and now stronger. Now, there's a long list here of shotguns that were buffed, but they're still shotguns at the end of the day, and I think all of them remain inviolable pretty much. So the Iron Hide, the Einhorn, the Double Barrel Combat Shotty 725, Model 680, Rogue, Power, Gallo, Graciato, Origin 12, and Street Sweeper all saw damage buffs to their pellets and whatnot, but they're limited to like 8 meters. So they're great within those 8 meters, but outside of that, they're completely useless still. I think we're going to see more people using shotguns now, and there is some one-shot potential with a few of these, but they're not going to be game-breaking. Now, the Vanguard car actually got an ADS buff, so it's a little bit faster. It's still not the strongest in the world, though, which is a bit unfortunate. It's staying in competitive. The 3-line also got some damage multiplier buffs. It's still the best sniper in the game, I would say, but it's not like what sniping was before, where it was just so consistent, so fast. The one-shots were flying. It's no OG Car 98K, right? So it's got to stay in competitive. I still don't think there's a meta sniper, but we know some sniper changes are coming. The Gorenko also got some ADS transition speed buffs, but it's still way too slow, so it's staying inviable. All right, now we've got post-edit Zach with the new shirt because I recorded this last night, but this morning they dropped some new patch notes that we covered earlier today. If you haven't caught that video yet, feel free to go check it out, where they ended up buffing a ton of different snipers. So quickly want to run through this. It doesn't change things a ton, but it does pose some interesting competitions now between the sniper categories. So Vanguard car, better range. I'm just going to make this easy. Every single sniper we talk about here got its max damage range increased by about 35%. So that's all the buffs that happen. So Vanguard car, it doesn't make it top meta, but it's now going to be better than before. The Type 99, same deal. The 3-line, that damage range increase might make it a little bit better. It is now the closest thing to being a meta sniper, at least in my opinion. I don't want to necessarily put it up there yet, but it's definitely right there. So the 3-line, very, very good. The Gorenko also ended up getting its damage range increased. The Swiss did as well. So this is actually really nice because, of course, it kind of got destroyed with its one-shot capability before. It'll be a little bit better now. Nothing crazy. Still definitely better on Fortune's Keep and Rebirth than on Caldera, but solid. Same deal with the AX50. Better damage range. Does that make it meta? I don't think so. Spoiler alert. While all these snipers are still better, they're not the snipers they once were. And even then, we only ever had the Swiss and the car in the top tier meta areas. So you might be able to see where this trend is heading. Dragunov, the one lone garbage sniper here, it's not changing. It's staying here forever. I mean it. It's never going to get out of that garbage tier category. HDR, same deal, but I don't think it's quite meta. It's also very close, though, for what it's worth. The Rytech ended up getting its damage range increase as well, but it's still kind of clunky, so I don't think that's making it up. Pellington, it's getting better for sure. It's one of the top tier snipers now, in my opinion, at least. The ZRG is probably right there with the 3-line in the absolute closest to being top meta, but I don't think it's there again because of its slower mobility and whatnot. The SPR, same deal. It's just a little bit too close still for an aggressive sniper to be that dominant, so staying in competitive. Tundra, same deal, staying as is. M82, and then the MW car as well. While it did get a slight range increase, it's still not going to be able to one-shot at any range, so great for Rebirth. And Fortune's Keep, not so great for Caldera. It's basically, if you want to play on Caldera, it's ZRG and 3-line. If you want to play on Rebirth and Fortune's Keep, it's Swiss and Car and Pellington, in my own opinion. The M1 Grand ended up getting some damage multiplier buffs. Still an awkward weapon because the semi-auto, its magazine capacity is not great. I don't think it's getting any better than viable, if I'm being honest with you. The Shadow Hunter crossbow and the normal crossbow, which of course we have as niche weapons here, got accuracy buffs, but if you miss one shot, you're probably dead. You got to be so accurate with these, it's ridiculous. So they're not going to ever switch out of niche. If you're good with them, though, man, are they strong. Now, the Whitley also saw a few damage buffs to some of the magazine options. Still a little bit too slow for my liking, and especially to be comparable with some of these top meta weapons. It's not going to win a lot of fights there because of its mobility. Its damage is solid, but it's got other drawbacks that are a little bit too noticeable, so it's staying in competitive for that reason. Now, here's one that might throw you off a little bit. The UGM8 did see some damage and some control buffs, but I don't think it's a meta weapon anymore. It was meta when it was the burst, and we just haven't updated the list since then, since that burst barrel got nerfed. So it's gonna drop down to competitive, still a top LMG option, just not as broken as it once was. Now, the Carve surprisingly got a range buff, staying in competitive though. Then the M16 actually bumps up to competitive because it got a damage buff, which is going to make it a little bit stronger over range. It's already easier to use than the AUG in terms of controls. So M16 slowly creeping up. If it got another buff for whatever reason down the road, it might be that burst meta sort of return in Warzone. But for now, it's just a solid competitive option. Here's another one that I don't think anyone saw coming, right? The Desert Eagle. It got an insane buff. This thing is so strong now. If you can land some headshots and some chest shots, I'm not gonna lie, I want to put it in competitive. It's so broken now if you're an accurate player, man. It is very spicy. So hard to use, but so rewarding. The Rat also ended up getting a slight damage buff as well, so that's going to make things a bit more competitive. Still semi-auto though, so harder to use. Now that said, I think I should adjust this list a little bit more based off of things that did not change, but as we see other weapons adjusted, they sort of indirectly end up being altered. The MP40, as good as it is for mobility and whatnot, I do think drops down as a just competitive SMG. One of the better competitive options up there with the Armaguerra, but it's not something I'd be picking over the Blixen or the Marco right now, or even the PPSH, which has sort of risen in stock recently too. Same deal with the Whale Gun. It's such a great sniper support SMG, but it's close range TTK, not really up there with some of these other options in the category. That said, we definitely have a more diverse top meta and one that's a lot more competitive and close. Before, it was just the NZ. Now though, the bar is not too bad if you can control the recoil. NZ needs another nerf, so it's still going to be a top choice, and I don't think many people are going to deviate from it. But if you want to, Vargo 52, great right now. AS44, my personal favorite weapon in the game right now. Nikita is feeling strong. The Krig is great. The Kilo is going to be a ton of fun now. There's a lot more options for close range and long range, which you'll love to see. As we see more weapon tuning updates in the future, in the coming days and weeks, we're probably going to be adjusting this list even more. But for now, that is where the meta sits. A lot of weapons in viable, a lot of weapons in competitive, and probably the most weapons we've seen in meta that are diverse in quite some time. So the meta is looking pretty solid right now, if I do say so myself. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video though. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. Would be seriously appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, or if you have not already subscribed, every single day I got you covered with everything going on in COD. News, updates, loadouts, tips, whatever it may be, you'll find it here on the channel. So feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I will catch you guys later. Peace out.